If you do your best work quietly, in your head before you ever say it out loud, this video is about what that costs you at work. Not because you're doing anything wrong, not because you need to become someone else, but because the system that decides who gets promoted was not designed for how you operate, and nobody is going to tell you that directly. By the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why visibility, not competence, controls career outcomes, and what that means specifically for someone who works the way you do. You have probably spent a long time assuming the problem was something about you, that you were too quiet, too reserved, that you should be more like the people who seem to move effortlessly through organizations, talking easily, filling rooms, making themselves known. That is not the problem. The problem is structural, and it has been there from the beginning. Here's how workplaces actually make decisions about people. When a promotion comes up, when a high-visibility project needs a lead, when a name needs to be put forward in a room, the decision is almost never made by reviewing output data. It is made by whoever comes to mind first. And the people who come to mind first are the people who have been most present in the minds of the people doing the deciding. That's it. That's the entire mechanism. Presence in the mind of the decision-maker determines the outcome far more than quality of work. And the way you build presence in someone's mind is through repeated, low-stakes interaction, small conversations, questions asked in meetings, thoughts offered in hallways, not grand performances, just the steady accumulation of being noticed. For someone who processes internally, who thinks before speaking, who finds small talk genuinely costly, who does their best work alone and presents it fully formed, that accumulation does not happen naturally, not because you are incapable of it, because it runs counter to how you're wired. Every interaction that comes effortlessly to someone else requires something from you, and over time, that cost adds up. This is not a character flaw, it is an energy equation. And the workplace was designed by people for whom that energy equation looks completely different. So while you were doing the work, producing, thinking, delivering, someone else was doing something the organization values just as much, possibly more. They were being seen. They were building the mental presence that makes a name come to mind when an opportunity opens up. And the reason this never gets explained to you is that the people who benefit from it do not think of it as a strategy. For them, it's just how work works. They've never had to think about it, which means they've never had to name it, which means nobody ever told you. Here's what makes this worse. The qualities that make you good at your job, thoroughness, depth of thinking, the ability to concentrate without distraction, are also the qualities that make you invisible inside an organization that rewards surface-level visibility. You don't interrupt in meetings because you are still thinking. They read that as disengagement. You don't volunteer for things loudly because you want to be sure you can deliver. They read that as lack of ambition. You don't fill silences with noise. They read that as having nothing to say. None of those reads are accurate, but they are the reads being made. And in the absence of a strong counter-narrative, in the absence of you actively creating a different picture, the default picture is the one that sticks. Here's the part that took me longest to understand, and it's the part most people never reach. The introvert penalty at work is not just about visibility, it's about whose version of reality gets treated as the default. Organizations are social systems, and social systems, by definition, are shaped by the people who participate most actively in their social fabric. The people who talk more, share more, and show up in informal spaces have a disproportionate influence on the stories an organization tells about its people. If you're not in those conversations, the ones after the meeting, the ones in the corridor, the ones that technically are not about work, but somehow determine everything about it, you're not shaping your own story. Someone else is, or worse, no one is, and the absence becomes the story. The absence of a narrative about you gets filled not with neutrality, but with assumption. And assumptions default to mediocrity when there's nothing else to go on. You might be the most capable person on the floor, but capability that is not visible, not spoken about, not associated with a name in the right rooms, does not exist in the decision-making process. It simply doesn't register. This is why you have watched less capable people get selected ahead of you and felt something was wrong but couldn't name what it was.
What was wrong was not a judgment about your ability. It was the absence of a story. They had one. You didn't. You were overlooked because you were not good enough. You were overlooked because the organization never built a picture of you that matched the reality of what you were doing. You kept your head down and delivered. You assumed the work would speak, and the work did speak, just not in the language the organization was listening for. So what does this actually mean? It doesn't mean you need to pretend to be someone you're not. It doesn't mean you need to perform extroversion or manufacture small talk that feels hollow. Anyone who has tried to do that for a sustained period knows it's unsustainable, and people can tell. What it means is that you need to be deliberate about the one thing the organization needs from you that your natural mode does not automatically produce: a story, a visible record of what you're doing and where you're going. Not loudly, not constantly, but strategically. The people who advance are not always the most naturally social. Some of them are deeply reserved, but they learned at some point to translate their work into language that travels, brief, clear, deliberate communication that reaches the people who need to know about it. Not performances, not campaigns, just consistent, low-volume signal in the right direction. One conversation with the right person once a month is worth more than a year of excellent work no one can see. A short written update to your manager every week about what you're working on and what you're thinking about costs almost nothing and builds a picture over time that no single output can build alone. The visibility tax is real. You will always pay it differently than someone who is naturally high visibility. But knowing it exists, knowing it's structural, not personal, knowing it's a design flaw in the system and not a flaw in you, changes how you respond to it. You're not fixing yourself. You're navigating a system that wasn't built for you. That distinction matters. It changes the whole frame. The organization rewarded presence over output, not because presence is more valuable, it's not, but because presence is easier to remember when it's time to make a decision. And decisions get made by people with imperfect information, working from what they can readily recall. You can't change that, but you can stop being invisible to it. That's corporate GPS, the map they never handed you.